Hey guys, Duke here. Here I am once again in the closet of shattered dreams and lost money. But today we're going to be tackling a topic which I've been actually asked several times on my channel, but I've never been able to fully, I haven't been able to decide how I wanted to go about tackling the topic. And that is what my top 10, I guess, because that's the most common I see people suggest, the top 10 favorite masks that I personally love out of my collection. Now, they didn't specify my collection, but they kind of left it open-ended, so I'm just going to assume that they meant within my collection. I could do a video where I say my top 5 favorite masks historically, or just top 5 favorite masks to actually use. I don't really know, but just for the sake of, having potential future content along those lines, I'm just going to start with just an assortment of random masks in my collection, which I find my personal favorite. I'm standing up for this one because I'm probably going to be digging through a lot of crap and kind of there's going to be a lot to sift through, but let's get started. But right off the bat, before I do, I'd like to say that this is not in any particular order. This is not in a chronological list of my personal preferences down the line. However, I will say that I am saving my personal favorite for last, but that being said, let's get started. So where do we begin? I haven't really thought about this again. I'm just kind of diving into this, but if I had to make a number 10 slot, that would actually have to go to a underdog here, the Chinese PLA Type 64B. Excuse me, I'm kind of rusty on my Chinese mask. I actually got a Chinese mask coming in the mail pretty soon, so I'll be doing a video on that eventually. But in the meantime, this mask takes the number 10 slot on my favorites just because it's kind of a very impressive mask for what it is. It has a lot of very intricate and modern design features that I would honestly say rival the masks of their respective time period in the 60s. But nevertheless, its biggest downfall is its construction, its poor storage methods, and so on and so forth that kind of puts this mask on the lower tier for me. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting design, very simple yet very intimidating. Absolutely love the mechanical function of this design, and shame that China didn't really improve much upon it. But Type 64B is definitely one of my favorite masks, personally. Alright, putting that aside, before I knock anything over here, let's see what number 8 will be, or number 9. I can't count, folks. And I think things are... No, we're good. Alright, what's number 8? Good golly, this is probably going to be a long review in and of itself. Number 8, let's go ahead and say this thing. I shouldn't really count this, since this is not an actual mask. This is based off of a prototype design that existed, but it is in my collection, so I'm going to count it anyways. This is a sort of replica of a prototype mask that we do not know the designation of. It's been referred to in Russian circles as the MB-180 Owl, although Owl is a fictitious designation made up for the specific replica, made by Andrei Borshev, probably one of the leading figures in making replica gas masks at the current point. You can see him on VK at the Gas Mask Tech Lab group. But anyways, so this is one of my personal favorites. I will put in the number 9 slot just because, again, mostly just due to aesthetics of the thing. I absolutely I loathe the PMK2 sort of design. Just by principle, it has a lot of mechanical flaws in it, but just out of sheer appearance factor alone, it is a very, very interesting mask. I love the arrangement of everything, and it has a lot of potential, in all honesty, but Russia just didn't put the full effort forwards to really round out the mask and make it a good design, and having an optical variant just kind of hits on a few little soft spots with me, so that's why I really like this design. Obviously, having the all-black hardware and the green plastic is just... I love that so much. Shame on Russia for not sticking with this green plastic hardware. It's like one of the best things they could have done. One of the more aesthetic things, at least. But yeah, that's not much to say about that. If you want to check out more about that mask, I have an entire dedicated review on it that I think I still have actively up on my channel. But that's number 9. Going ahead to number 8 here. Let's see. What takes the number 8 spot? I will go ahead and give that to... Let's say... How about this? MSA Millennium. Very nice mask. Have no... After actually handling one and having one around and just seeing what it can do, seeing and learning about what exactly it protects against, and the I used to shit on this thing nonstop. I used to think this was a terrible mask. I actually love this thing now. Obviously, I have a M53A1 from Avon, and I have an M45, so kind of a no-brainer that I would pick those over this, but definitely a nice mask. I'm happy to have one in my collection. Very aesthetic design. That's probably the big thing that people absolutely love these for, is it is an absolutely aesthetic mask, but I'm just not a fan of the MCU platform. Again, my biggest complaints is just within all the inherent flaws with the design, mainly the nose cup. I hate the MCU nose cups with a passion. I'm like this weird facial proportion. I have very weird facial proportions where my nose is very higher up on my face. It's an outwards or an upturned facing nose, so naturally I have a more difficult time finding nose cups that fit me. I'm more of a, when it comes to US sizes, I'm a medium size with a large nose cup typically. That may vary depending on the era and the specific mask, but with things like the MCU2P or the M53, I am strictly a medium face piece with a large nose cup. But that's just my 2 cents on it. If it had a large nose cup in this would probably be perfect, and I would absolutely trust the hell out of this thing. This is an excellent mask. I would definitely recommend this for anyone wanting a sort of an actual CBRN protective mask on the lower end of the budget. Just make sure you know what you're getting so you're not getting a stinker of a product, because sometimes these can come with flaws in the rubber and obviously the issue of the lens yellowing. But that's not anything to do with my favorites list. That's just my 2 cents on that. So that's number 8. What is number 7? Let's see. Oh boy, I probably should have thought about this before I did this review. Number 7, probably I will have to hand to the, let's say the M3 and M4. Both of these kind of can combine as one. The American Lightweight Service Mask. These are kind of the ubiquitous late war American service mask. These are very typical of US design principles at the time, late war. Just all around, very simple, very solid design. They couldn't have gotten better than this. They tried to obviously make it better by adding side canisters later on and with things of that nature, which we'll get to. But this is really all that you needed, to be honest. It's a very good mask design, and they could have used this and milked this design for several years later. But the biggest flaw, in my opinion, with the design is its carrier. I am not a fan of the M6 carrier. It is very... it's hard to describe. It's a very uncomfortable carrier to wear. It's a very awkward carrier to manage. Having 3 lifted-out snaps on it is kind of a hassle to deal with. And honestly, this design could also probably work better if it didn't even have a nose cup, to be honest, because having Tcell deflectors and a nose cup is a little bit overkill. I do like the fact that it has a nose cup, though. In fact, the M3 and the M4 10116 series lightweight service masks were the first officially adopted U.S. military masks with integral oral nasal cups, but again, I kind of like these just because of how much of a historic peak. This was like the absolute best of the best back in the late 1940s, other than, say, masks like the E637 or M5117 Army Assault mask here, which I still need to finish restoring because I haven't been able to get the proper rivet dies to put the harness back on, but, you know, that's just life. Moving on from that, this was number 7, I believe. I am losing count fast. I am terrible at this, folks. I guess you're going to get a couple extras in there because I don't know my numbers. Let's see. That was number 7. Technically this was 2 because this is an M3. So, what's number 6? Number 6, I would probably hand off to this MSA, Mine Safety Appliances, obviously, Burel Diaphragm gas mask. This is obviously the later pattern. There was an earlier pattern which had a stockinette fabric covering over the rubber. These were introduced sometime in the late 1920s, and these were used well into the 1940s, possibly 50s. This was one of MSA's flagship masks at the time as a competitor to the Burel Cops type. Well, not a competitor, it was sort of like a cousin mask, I guess. Obviously, this is based off of, or this variant is loosely based off of the KTM. It's got the same profile and arrangement and everything as a KTM, but obviously a few extra bells and whistles added to the design to make it more durable, and that logic sort of followed suit with the Burel Diaphragm mask. And obviously it is a industrialized rendition of the U.S. Army M1 diaphragm masks and obviously the U.S. Navy Mark I diaphragm. I don't know, it's just a very cool design. It's just interesting to see how the U.S. military, or MSA, took the M1A1 or the Cops Tcell Monroe design like this. Again, I probably should be pulling things off the shelves like this. And they just kind of industrialized it. They got rid of the whole stockinette stuff and they kind of made it integral, and they just made everything work. Not many, I mean, any flaws that I can complain about with this design are pretty much kind of a moot point since it's such an old mask, but definitely one of my favorites just out of personal aesthetics alone. Very, very peculiar and interesting design. Also, needless to say, this was one of the very first masks with a voice diaphragm, or at least based off of one of the first masks with a voice diaphragm, so definitely a historic mask on that right. And that was number 6. Number 5, let us see. Number 5, I would probably hand off to, oh gee, let's see. Probably the M43 and M48 Chemical Biological Apache Aircrew masks. Obviously this is Moulage's Type 2 M43A2 face piece up here. And in this giant monstrosity of a carrier is my M48, which I didn't feature this in the last review, but I actually got a face piece bag for this, which I was missing from the last kit, so my M48 face piece is all folded up, tucked nicely in there. I'm not going to get it out just because you can check out my M48 review if you want to see the face piece on this thing. But yeah, very intimidating design. Absolutely love just the oddness of this thing. Some of you are saying, oh, it looks like a GIMP mask. Some of you say, oh, it's such a scary mask. Well, you're kind of both right. But definitely one of my favorite designs on pure aesthetics alone. Obviously not a mask that I would recommend using, just because I guess the rarity, you can't really find a lot of these floating around. In fact, I was extremely lucky to get this for the price that was offered. And then B, they're just too historical to really use. I get that they're sort of a modern mask. These are being recently phased out, but they're sort of too valuable to use, if you can really believe that. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about when this only costs like around the 300 to 500, maybe a little bit more range, and then M53s are like $1,000 as a starting price, but I don't know. It's just a weird thing to think about. You can't really get spare parts for these anymore, but definitely a favorite of mine just for its pure creepy factor. Obviously, some of you are going to say, like, oh, gas masks are creepy. Yes, that's true. I know a lot of you are into gas masks, but just for the normal person that hasn't seen one before, this is honestly one of the most intimidating designs you could possibly consider. Probably just short of the M2 Optical up here, but that's another story. Let's put this monstrosity away. Oh boy, floppy ass carrier in here. Okay, let's get that. You know what, we'll just leave that like that for now. I'll put that away properly later. So that was number 5. Number 4, that would probably have to go to my Finnish M95. This, on principle, is one of my favorite gas mask designs in terms of its function. This is one of the best functioning gas masks that you could potentially own, and for a reasonable price too. And you may notice that mine actually now has a very rare original deflector. A lot of the early M95s came with a plastic deflector over the outlet for some peculiar reason, usually to, I guess, deflect moisture away from you or something. I guess it's to protect it from dirt or debris. Nevertheless, these were kind of ditched fast, and I managed to get one for myself. Thanks to Raptor, who had one on spare from when he sold his M95. He managed to hang on to the outlet deflector for me, which I recently bought. You may notice mine's missing the drinking port cover. I still have it intact. I've just opted to remove it because these have a big flaw of breaking off. I know that there is a current production variant of the M95 that has a black plastic or black rubberized drinking port cover. And again, I would recommend these based on the fact of if you're not going to get it, not intending to use it with a drinking device, because the drinking devices for this mask are quite difficult to locate. They aren't being produced anymore, to my knowledge. You can't. There used to be a Camelback adapter for these called the Model S, which I actually also have in addition to the Canteen, but those have stopped being produced as well. So you can only every so often find them, usually with M98 kits. But definitely otherwise, M95 is one of the best masks out there in terms of its simplicity. As a civilian, I would recommend this mask wholeheartedly. There's like very few other masks that I would recommend over this one if you're a civilian and you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles of the M53A1s or the Avon FM53 or even the C50. If you don't need comms integration, get an M95 or a Millennium. Doesn't matter, but in terms of my personal favorites, I rank this number 4. Definitely good design. And it's also, in terms of modern masks, it's also my most comfortable mask, believe it or not. The most comfortable mask in my collection is actually my M14A1 up here, because there's basically literally nothing inside the face piece. I can't think of how a mask could be even more comfortable than having literally nothing in the face piece, but what have you. In terms of nose cup fit and everything else, this is my most comfortable, especially for a modern mask. Alright, now that is number 4, so let's move on to number 3. As soon as I put this away in this, again, very uncommon Finnish carrier, which you never see on the surplus market. This is the original carrier for the M95. Putting that away. So, number 3. I have to think a bit on this one. Number 3, you know what? I'm just going to say it. Probably one of my many Acron Tcell masks, which I will put out on the screen here for your visual pleasure. It's in a tub down here. I'm not going to dig it out. There's a ton of crap on top of here, and I keep all my World War I stuff down in a plastic tub, properly stored with acid-free packing paper, lots of silica gel in various places, not contacting the mask, but just taking every precaution I can with what little I have to make sure that those masks won't rot themselves to death any further, even though it's kind of inevitable, but I'm doing what I can, and they're going to be moved to a better location once I move out of here, so keep that in mind as well. But obviously, AT, just the mask that I've been studying ever since before I began collecting, ever since, like, even before I've even bought my first gas mask, I was studying the AT, and it wasn't until 2018 when I started to pick up that study again, and I discovered lots of new things, and was able to piece together a comprehensive timeline on the design, and was able to establish it as probably the most influential mask in American gas mask development, just for its sheer arrangement, and the fact that it was the first solidly molded rubber gas mask that we kind of adopted. It was still kind of technically experimental, but it was issued well into the 1930s as a training mask, so I'm going to go on a limb and say it was actually adopted formally to some degree. But that's number 3. Number 2, I'm just going to go ahead and say my M53. So this is probably the mask that I currently use in my kit. Probably the best of the best in terms of US SOCOM gas mask designs. Has a few flaws with it that's currently being upgraded and fixed with masks like the XM55 Universal Mask program that Avon's currently working on. They plan to release it sometime around 2021. I'm excited to see how that turns out, because that's actually kind of an interesting design, because it literally takes the platform of the FM53 series and the FM54, and they basically what they did was they took this central variable resistance exhalation unit on the front here, which is obviously sticking up way too far, and it's very hard to drain moisture out of it. And what they did is they placed a standard voice diaphragm right here, and they've somehow integrated an outlet valve with an integral VREU on the chin here, where moisture can easily drain out. And there is a textured face seal on the XM53, or excuse me, XM55, and a lot of other neat features as well. I can't wait to see what that turns out like, but now that's not the topic of my favorite mask. This is the M53A1, complete with VREU lever. I know a lot of you are asking me where I got this VREU lever. I got this through sheer stroke of luck. I'm in the Gas Mask Collectors community on Facebook, and a dude who actually works for Avon is in that group. I'm not going to name him because I don't want you all beating down his door. If you want to find something, you got to be a little bit more tactful than just kind of beating down. I know I'm the dick for hoarding info, I know, but I'm trying to make people's lives a little bit easier here. I don't want to... Nothing on you guys, just want to save the guy some time. I don't want to call him out or anything, so hope you understand. But that's where I got these. He had a couple spare laying around, and he offered them to me for free as long as I paid shipping, and that's what I did, so I got extremely lucky. I wish all of you luck who were looking for one as well, but again, don't really know of a definite source for these. I kind of got these out of pure luck, as I've said 3 times already. Definitely a very interesting design. It's very peculiar to some, but there's actually a lot of careful thought that went into this design. What they did was they tailored it specifically to the demands of US SOCOM warfighters. They have designed it so that the mask offers a superior cheek weld when shouldering rifles and other types of small arms. The voice projection unit is very low profile, probably one of the lowest profile voice projection units of any protective mask currently issued. The drinking tube is extremely long, nothing to get in the way of there. Very easy to manage. Got a fail-proof drinking lever, which will cut off the airflow in case of a tear in the drinking tube. A pass-through comms port, which allows you to use communications equipment such as communication headsets and things of that nature while the VPU is in use, because you obviously have the VPU plugged into this port down here, and then you have a pass-through with a 2-pin connector. Obviously, I have mine with the Gore Chem-Pack protective hood, which is a little bit hard to find on the surplus market. You can't really find these a lot, but in all honesty, it's not a very worthy accessory. As I mentioned in my previous M53 reviews, they're kind of a bit sloppily designed. I'm sure they work fine and all, but if I were you, I would really rather look for something like a Blauer XRT suit, or even an old ratty JS List Type 2, which has an integral hood all of its own. Both of them do. So those would probably suit you a lot better than the Gore Chem-Pack hoods, in my personal opinion. Anyways, that's number 2. Haven't really... only a final thing to mention is the conformal filters for the M53 series mask, which are probably my favorite portion of this design. Very easy to use. They're very, very conformal, as their name would imply. I have the GPCF50 filters, which stands for, obviously, General Purpose Conformal Filter 50 series masks. And as you can see, they're a very unique design that have a sort of concave surface on the interior face with the threads, so that when they are threaded on, they lie flush with the mask. And you are really only supposed to use these with the FM53 series, or potentially the C50. I think the C50 can use these as well, I'm pretty sure. So that's another reason why I absolutely love this design, just because those conformal filters are so goofy. I love them. All right, many of you probably saw this one coming, but my number one favorite of all time, M45 CB mask. What else could it be? I love this thing to death. It's outdated by modern standards. It needs a secondary skin. Granted, the secondary skin is a very close fitting and very leak-proof one, compared to others at least. But just, it has everything that a US SOCOM mask needs, other than the fact that it does have a few downfalls, such as needing a dinky little adapter ring, which you have to permanently install, and obviously I haven't installed mine yet, because as you can see, I'm still working on the 3D model for a VPU injection mold ring, which I don't know when that's going to be finished, because I'm still working on setting up the tolerances for CNC machining that, but I'll let you guys know when that's being finalized. And then other problems, obviously, I mentioned the silicone, but again, that's not too big of an issue, just because of how closely fitting the secondary skin is, and it could be a little bit more improved in terms of its cheek weld integration, but that's not really as big of an issue compared to other things. Definitely, I like it because it allows you to use a comms pass-through without having to interfere with the VPU. It has a separate voice diaphragm and an outlet valve, which is the main thing I absolutely love this mask over the M53 for, is that you can actually drain out moisture without having to tilt your head forward or using that gross little sweat box in the bottom of the nose cup. The other major complaint I have about the M45 CB mask is its sizing. It is a very weird and difficult mask to fit properly. I have a size large here. That is what I find fits me the best, but the nose cup on the inside, it protrudes a little bit too far inwards. I'd probably do better with a medium nose cup, kind of the opposite of the M53 down there. Kind of weird. I've actually test fitted this with a medium nose cup. It is a little bit better, but honestly, this mask just fits way better on me when it doesn't have a nose cup in general, but, you know, live and let live. It's not too big a deal. But yeah, it's a very weird sizing system where, say, a medium M40A1 is actually larger than a medium M45, but a large M45 is actually larger than a large M40A1. It doesn't make any sense. But what this did introduce, which is very, very innovative, is its interchangeable nose cups, a feature which is actually carried over on the M53 mask down there. But other than that, the biggest thing I absolutely love about this design is its intimidation factor. It is a very, very intimidating mask. It is one of the most aesthetic masks out there. I absolutely love this thing to death. And make all the fetish jokes you want. It's just my personal golden standard for protective mask design, if you're not willing to look past a few topical design similarities to specific paraphernalia, if you will. But that's pretty much it. That's my personal favorites on protective mask design. I do have a few other complaints about the M45, such as its outlet valve. I'm currently also kind of working on a VREU assembly for the M45. I call it the VRAV, the Variable Resistance Accessory Valve. I don't know when I'm going to be finished with that. I'm just kind of working through the drawings at this current point, kind of figuring out what a good design would be for that, but I'll figure it out eventually. Who knows when, but it's better for me to move out first before I get really deep into these projects, because I don't have any room to build anything here. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's basically everything I need to say. That's my personal top 10 favorite gas masks in my collection for this video, for this current period. If you have any other recommendations for what kind of content you want to see on this channel, I'll be happy to listen to them. I do like to stick to a certain design or a pattern rhetoric. I like to stick to my historical topics, and I will be coming out with more historical-based or just informative-based reviews. But if you want to see more just kind of general, is this good, is this bad, I'll be willing to do that to a certain degree. I'm not going to, give everything lip service. I like to avoid giving personal recommendations just because there's a lot of differences in facial properties which you may not be able to fit, and I don't like to say one mask is going to be good for everyone, because it's really not. But again, that's neither here nor there. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them down in the comments section. As always, I'm Duke, and I will see you all later.